How does a horror movie about empty yellow hallways become one of the biggest film stories of 2026? Why are Hollywood executives suddenly paying attention to a director who was still in high school when this project was announced? And could a movie born from internet folklore reveal where the next generation of filmmakers will actually come from? Before we even talk about whether Backrooms is a great horror movie, we need to talk about why this film matters. Because beneath the strange corridors, flickering lights, and unsettling monsters, Backrooms is really a story about something much larger. It is about creativity emerging from unexpected places. It is about internet culture becoming mainstream entertainment. And most importantly, it is about a filmmaker who completely bypassed Hollywood's traditional gatekeepers. For decades, the entertainment industry followed a familiar formula: film school, festivals, independent projects, studio opportunities. Kane Parsons skipped almost all of it. At just 20 years old, he went from making Blender animations on YouTube to directing an A24 feature film starring acclaimed actors like Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renata Reinsve. The strange origins of Backrooms. The most fascinating thing about Backrooms is that it was never supposed to become a movie. Unlike famous horror franchises, it did not begin as a screenplay. It was not adapted from a best-selling novel. It was not created inside a studio development office. It started with a single image, a photograph showing an empty office-like space with faded yellow walls, stained carpet, and fluorescent lights stretching into seemingly endless rooms. There was nothing obviously frightening about the image. No monster, no violence, no explanation. Yet millions of people found it deeply unsettling. Soon, internet users began building mythology around the image. The idea was simple. If reality somehow glitched and you accidentally slipped through the wrong wall, you could find yourself trapped inside an endless maze known as the Backrooms. The concept spread across forums, social media platforms, YouTube channels, and online communities. Unlike traditional horror stories created by a single author, the Backrooms evolved collectively. Thousands of people contributed ideas, creatures, locations, and theories. In many ways, it became one of the first truly internet-native horror myths. What made it so effective was not the monsters, it was the feeling. The Backrooms represent what psychologists often describe as liminal spaces, places that feel familiar but strangely wrong. Empty schools after hours, deserted shopping malls, vacant office buildings, locations designed for people, but suddenly stripped of human presence. These environments create a unique form of anxiety because they challenge our understanding of normal reality. And nobody understood how to visualize that anxiety better than Kane Parsons, the kid who skipped Hollywood. When most future directors are learning about filmmaking, they are usually sitting in classrooms. Kane Parsons was busy terrifying millions of viewers online. As a teenager, Parsons began creating Backrooms videos using Blender, a free 3D animation software. Instead of relying on expensive equipment or large production teams, he built impossible environments and used digital effects to create a convincing illusion of reality. His breakthrough came with the Backrooms found footage in 2022. The video exploded across the internet. Viewers were fascinated by how authentic it felt. The camera movement, sound design, environmental storytelling, and subtle visual effects created the illusion that someone had genuinely discovered a place that should not exist. Millions of people watched, then millions more. Soon, major studios noticed something unusual. This teenager was attracting larger audiences than many professionally produced projects. Hollywood executives spent enormous amounts of money trying to identify emerging talent. Parsons had already proven his abilities publicly. The internet had effectively become his film school. YouTube had become his festival circuit, and his audience had become his portfolio. When A24 decided to turn Backrooms into a feature film, they were not taking a gamble on an unknown filmmaker. They were investing in someone who had already demonstrated an ability to capture the attention of millions. The real question was whether those skills could translate into a full-length movie. Is Backrooms actually good? The answer is surprisingly complicated, but overall, yes. The film succeeds far more often than it fails. Its greatest strength is atmosphere. From the opening scenes, Parsons demonstrates a remarkable understanding of visual tension. The Backrooms feel enormous, oppressive, and completely disconnected from reality. Every room appears familiar enough to recognize, but strange enough to create discomfort. Critics repeatedly praise the film's atmosphere, production design, and ability to generate dread through space itself, rather than relying exclusively on jump scares. Another major strength is visual storytelling. Modern horror films often explain too much. Characters constantly discuss rules, lore, and backstory. Backrooms frequently chooses silence instead. Long stretches of the film rely on environmental details, sound design, and careful cinematography. Parsons trusts the audience to interpret what they are seeing rather than providing immediate answers. That approach creates mystery, and mystery is essential to horror. The film also understands something that many adaptations fail to recognize. The environment is the monster. Yes, there are creatures lurking throughout the Backrooms, but the true threat is the architecture itself. Endless hallways, impossible geometry, rooms that seem to rearrange rearrange themselves. The film transforms physical space into a source of terror. That does not mean the movie is flawless. Some critics argued that the characters occasionally feel less developed than the central concept. Others felt the narrative sometimes struggles to maintain momentum as the film explores increasingly abstract ideas. Those criticisms are fair, but even when the film stumbles, it remains fascinating, and that is an important distinction. Many horror movies are forgettable. Backrooms is not. Why Kane Parsons Could Change Hollywood. The most important thing about Backrooms is not what happens on screen. It is what happened behind the camera. For generations, Hollywood relied on a relatively narrow talent pipeline. Studios discovered filmmakers through film schools, festivals, agencies, and industry connections. Kane Parsons represents a completely different model. He emerged directly from the internet, and that changes everything. Today, creators can build audiences before ever stepping into a studio office. They can experiment with storytelling techniques, receive immediate feedback, and develop fan communities entirely online. Parsons demonstrated that a creator can spend years refining their craft publicly and arrive in Hollywood already possessing a dedicated audience. That is extremely valuable. Studios are increasingly interested in creators who bring both talent and existing fan bases. Backrooms also signals a shift in the types of intellectual property Hollywood may pursue. For decades, studios focused heavily on novels, comic books, and video games. Now, internet folklore is entering the conversation. The Backrooms began as a community-created concept. There was no traditional creator behind it, no publishing company, no established franchise. Yet it still evolved into a successful theatrical release. That reality could encourage studios to pay much closer attention to online storytelling communities, analog horror projects, ARGs, creepypastas, and emerging digital creators. Perhaps the most significant change involves age. Historically, directing major films often required decades of experience. Parsons became one of the youngest directors ever trusted with a project of this scale. Critics and industry observers repeatedly highlighted the remarkable fact that a 20-year-old filmmaker was leading a major studio production. That forces Hollywood to reconsider old assumptions about where talent comes from and how quickly it can emerge. The economics Hollywood cannot ignore. There is another reason executives are paying attention: money. Lots of it. According to industry reports, Backrooms was produced for approximately $10 million. That is an incredibly modest budget by modern Hollywood standards. The results have been extraordinary. Within days of release, the film surpassed $100 million globally. It later climbed beyond $250 million worldwide, becoming a 24's highest-grossing film. Those numbers matter a lot. Hollywood has spent years pursuing larger budgets and increasingly expensive franchises. But Backrooms demonstrates an alternative approach: low budget, strong concept, built-in audience, distinctive creative voice, high profit potential. That combination is extremely attractive to studios searching for sustainable business models. Of course, there is a risk. Hollywood has a habit of learning the wrong lessons from success. Instead of searching for unique creators like Parsons, some executives may simply look for the next internet trend to adapt. And those are very different things. The magic of Backrooms is not that it originated online. The magic is that the filmmaker understood exactly why it resonated with people. The first true Gen Z horror director. Every generation develops its own fears. Classic slashers reflected anxieties of their era. Found footage horror emerged alongside the rise of consumer cameras and internet sharing. Elevated horror explored social and psychological concerns. Backrooms feels distinctly Gen Z, not because it references modern culture directly, but because it captures a very specific kind of digital age anxiety. The fear of disconnection, the fear of endless information, the feeling of being trapped inside systems too large to understand. Parsons grew up immersed in online culture, analog horror, internet mysteries, and collaborative storytelling. These influences shaped his creative instincts in ways that differ significantly from previous generations of filmmakers. As a result, Backrooms does not feel like an older filmmaker trying to imitate internet culture. It feels like internet culture creating its own filmmaker. That distinction may seem subtle, but it could have enormous implications for the future of horror cinema. Maybe Backrooms becomes a horror classic. Maybe it does not. Maybe audiences remember every hallway, every creature, and every terrifying sequence. Or maybe they simply remember the name Kane Parsons. Either way, the film has already accomplished something remarkable. A 20-year-old creator who started by making videos on YouTube convinced one of the industry's most respected studios to invest in a vision that traditional Hollywood might never have developed on its own. The success of Backrooms suggests that the next generation of filmmakers may emerge from entirely different places than previous generations. Not from film schools, not from industry internships, not from decades spent climbing corporate ladders, but from bedrooms, laptops, free software, and ideas strong enough to capture the attention of millions. If that future arrives, Backrooms will be remembered as more than a successful horror movie. It will be remembered as the moment Hollywood looked online and realized the future of filmmaking had already arrived. If you enjoyed this analysis, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into films, filmmaking, and the stories behind the movies shaping the future of Hollywood.